This week we're reading Master of Crows by Grace Draven, otherwise known as I Have a Boner for This Cover.
Hi readers, I'm Jordan.
And I'm Katie.
And welcome to Not Another Heroine, the podcast where we break down the best and worst fictional heroines, those swashbuckling ladies who have to work a little harder than expected for their happy ending.
Want to see what's next on our TBR list? Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Instagram for a sneak peek at upcoming content or to help us pick our next book. Master of Crows
By Grace Draven.
Yes.
We've only talked about this particular book in almost every single episode we've recorded so far.
Yeah, because at first I was like, oh, she's going to say we haven't talked about it that much. And I'm like, I don't know that that's true. And then
I think as much as we've talked about ACOTAR.
Yeah, I'm thinking.
And Crown Duel, for that matter.
That is true. I almost feel like it's like ACOTAR, Master of Crows, and then Crown Duel. And that's a very like weird
combination
triage.
Yeah, because one is firmly YA, one is very much on the spicy end.
Yeah.
And one is like Hollywood blockbuster of the fantasy romance genre.
Mm-hmm. So Master of Crows.
Master of Crows.
Yeah.
Wow, where do we even...
I don't know. Do you want to start with our general notes?
Yeah, so just to kind of clear some things up. Well, I guess stuff that we just wanted to talk about before we kind of got into the plot and the synopsis and the characters, which is we both found that the names in particular of the characters, like specific details of the book, were way easier to recall than like we have talked about entire books for 20 minutes and couldn't remember the character's name.
Yeah, it's like, what is this gal's name again? I don't remember.
You and I have both read Half a Soul like multiple times.
Yeah.
What are the characters' names?
Yeah. Isn't the random one guy Albert?
You remembered the secondary male character.
Yeah. That is all that is in my brain right now.
But
Albert.
But for example, in this book, like we have Silhara and Martise as the two leads.
And then Gurn and Anya and
Kale.
Kale. Kale. First I thought the leafy vegetable, but no,
Kale.
The dog.
The dog. Like, yeah, that's what I mean. Even the dog is memorable in this book. And I think what we kind of stumbled on,
yes.
I remembered something I wanted to point out in the beginning, which is in addition to taking shots, Katie is wearing the most magnificent, superb Twilight t-shirt you have ever seen in your life.
Yes, I am.
How did you describe the look of Edward?
Yeah, Edward is very slightly yassified.
Could you translate for our older audience?
Yeah, I've had to explain this a time or two. So do you use Facetune or have you heard of Facetune?
I've heard of it.
Okay, it's like the Instagram app that lets you like make your face look more airbrushed and like more, but it's so like clinical in its application that you can tell when people are using Facetune. And so people call it yassifying, like, yes, girl. And that's what they did to Robert Pattinson slightly. Like his cheekbones are cheekboning.
They look like they drew lines underneath his cheekbones.
Yeah.
And he's got the like brows are lower. He's somewhat glaring. The hair is very fluffy.
Yeah. So Hot Topic had a selection of Twilight shirts, but also there's some excellent ones on Etsy. There's a whole store of Twilight t-shirts.
So now that we've established the vibe, we're drinking soju. Katie's wearing a magnificent Edward Twilight t-shirt. We have snacks galore. This is a true Katie and Jordan recording session.
Yeah, that's what Master of Crows deserves.
Yeah.
It does. Yeah, we've talked about this book almost excessively.
So another slightly, maybe a hot take, is that while I enjoyed the second read and it was very fast, I was not as enamored of it on the second read.
That's fair. Fourth read.
How much time did you spend in the last third of the book, Katie?
Limited. This is my fourth read, and I think about the fourth time is when you're like, oh, okay, this is a little bit like, I know exactly what's going to happen. Everything's fine. My partner made some jokes. He was like, oh yeah, you hit the, climax, the eyebrow wiggle, and then you don't need to read the rest. And I was like, well, that happens at like 40%. And he's like, and I was like, okay. That is 75% accurate for this book, I would say.
Well, we also caved and we got the hard copies.
Yeah.
Which they're surprisingly hard to find because I think it's an indie publisher.
Yeah, it's like BAE books or SAE books. I feel like you know what
I don't actually. No, not on this one.
It's some kind of like rando, like this company's gonna steal my credit card information, but it's not.
ABE books.
Oh, yeah.
That one. So it's like a site for used book retailers, I guess. But these came from Texas. They're both used copies. But my God, the cover art is...
Oh my God. Stunning.
Like it even feels nice.
Yeah. This is... And it's interesting too because in her... what's it called when authors like write notes at the beginning? Dedication?
Acknowledgements? Preface? I don't know.
That area. I think she says that this is like a painting. Like it's like a portrait or something is like based on the book. I think so. Yeah, but beautiful. Like this is artwork.
Yeah. So some of these fantasy romance, like indie publishing, indie art, it's kind of cheesy.
Yeah.
This is something like, I rarely buy a book because it's pretty.
Yeah.
This is a book where you just want to hold it.
Yeah.
Because the artwork, and I think part of the reason is because you can't see the characters' faces. They're just in profile enough that it's a mystery.
It's beautiful.
It's very nice.
It kind of makes me want to cry. Like it's the tones, the like coloring. Yeah. And it has those like, for my tactile people, it has that like weird, like soft.
Not glossy finish, but it's like a matte kind of.
Oh God. Have a boner for this book. Sorry, that was inappropriate.
That might be the episode title.
Everything's fine. But you know, there's just moments. Yeah, Jordan just took her shot. That's fair.
I can't.
I'm a little bit ashamed, but also it's true. Because you know those covers that are just like, yeah.
Do
you want to talk about the writing style? Because I feel like this is kind of important.
Yes. So Grace Draven has a very unique is kind of a cliche way to put it, but her style of writing. So she typically writes in third person. She alternates perspective, but it's not like a forced perspective switch. You know how a lot of authors, each chapter is dedicated to a certain character. She kind of flows with the story itself. So where it makes sense for characters to be kind of viewing the scene from that character's perspective is when the writing style switches. And so you don't really notice it a lot. And it also, I think, is part of the reason why it enables us to remember the specific details.
Yeah.
Because you get so much back and forth where you're viewing it from so many characters. You learn the names because they have to be repeated because the characters are repeating it.
Yeah, because this is also told in the third person instead of the first person, which I feel like a lot of fantasy romance is first person.
It feels kind of like this is aggressive. It feels kind of like a cop-out to write in first person.
I could see that 100%.
That's not to say I don't like reading it, because I do enjoy reading a well-written first-person narration. I think sometimes it flows better, it's faster.
Yeah.
But there is an art, I think, to writing in third person, like Juliette Marillier, or did I butcher that name again? How did we learn how to say it?
I could not tell you.
Daughter of the Forest.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yes.
So that author also does third person, or she wrote in first person.
I think it might have been in first person.
Oh my God. Well,
but it was like first person with like flirting with third person.
Yeah.
Where it wasn't totally obvious all the time. I don't know.
There seems to be an art to writing in that style without, one, pulling the reader out of the world, right? Because you still feel immersed in the characters. But sometimes with third person, I feel like you're just watching from above and you don't feel attached to anything.
Yeah.
With Grace Draven stuff, you're like, nope, I'm equally invested in everyone.
Yeah, because she has something kind of not magical, but it feels like mature in her writing, that she can switch between characters and you feel equally invested and the story isn't like jarred with each of the switches. Because I think that's something people stumble across when they have point of view switches in first person where it's like jarring. You feel like you're like ripped out of the story and then you're like, okay, this is like a new scene. Like what the fuck is happening?
Well, yeah. And also, how do you convey realistically switching from between two first-person narrations, especially between a male and a female character.
Yeah, because the voice is always fucked up.
It's weird. And I will say, I feel like Grace Draven's male characters are somewhat believable. Like, now, I would want a dude's perspective to be like, is this dude written realistically given the situation? But, like, it seems legitimate.
Yeah, because I feel like a lot of fantasy romance, and I feel like I say that a lot, but we've read a lot of fantasy romance.
We live in this genre.
Because I feel like a lot of books kind of succumb to a man written by a woman. That's like a whole like trope thing, which I love. Like, I am the first person
that's
in
why
line.
we read it. And it's like they do this, like women written by men, like have a certain style.
Everything's like about their boobs somehow. Like, they're not that big part of my life. But Grace Draven writes very convincing men. Like, it's not uber patriarchal, but just the way that men in society exist and are just a little bit different than people who like identify as women. And it's convincing without being like in your face, like, I'm a dude. It's just like, oh, yeah, this is someone of maybe a different gender. Yeah, it's very convincing.
So if that's not enough to sell you on Master of Crows, I mean, it's a very lyrical without being drowning in description of scenery.
Yeah, because also it's smutty, which I think is something that a lot of more hardcore fantasy authors maybe don't stray into as much.
Yeah. And
like you're either one or the other.
I feel like her writing style like leans into literature. And yet, and this is a good segue into talking about how spicy this book is. Like, there are scenes in this book that are,
I was going to say puckering, but
I love that actually.
You know what I mean?
Puckering. I feel gross just restating that. But that's accurate.
Yeah. But in a not bad way. You're just like, oh, okay, this is a sex scene.
I'm just replaying that word in my head in the way you said it. So, okay, you don't get to the spiciness until about like 70%.
Girl, I think it's way.
Is it earlier?
I think it's sooner.
I know it's implied, but like they don't actually have.
So that kind of segues well into the intimacy versus
spiciness.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of points earlier in this book where you get intimacy without it being explicit sexual acts, but you're like, oh, this is like hot, but it's not so hot.
I guess the line for me is when she gets very specific with how explicit.
Jordan's voice just went through the whole grieving process.
I don't know where I'm going.
It's fine.
We should just start talking about the plot, and let's just say that it gets very, very spicy, like borderline erotica as far as the level of detail. Because we've talked about this before in other books, which is how do you define spicy?
Yeah.
Is it the frequency of romantic sexual scenes in the book, or is it the level of detail given to those specific scenes? And I would say for this book, it steers more into the level of detail given rather than the frequency.
Yeah, because I think there's only like 3, possibly like
but they're very memorable.
Yeah, they are ones that you will remember for a while. And that sounds like graphic, but they're just like well written also. Because I would compare it in spiciness to Nesta's story. What is that? A Court of
Silver Flames?
Yeah. So if that's your spiciness level, this is equivalent.
But it is nice because you have to earn it. Like you have to progress through the relationship to get to that point. And a lot of authors, I feel, kind of cater to certain audience types that want that like right in your face.
Yeah. And it's nice too because the relationship doesn't culminate to that. That's like a pleasant side like stop on the road, but there's like still things they need to figure out.
The end of the plot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's our
rant.
That's our preface to actually getting into Master of Crows.
Yes.
And yeah, this is a fun read. This is a true fantasy romance read. So we'll kind of get into it right about now. Master of Crows.
The Master of Crows.
We have developed our rule for shots, which is, you put it better than I did.
Whenever someone says something like really outrageous, and the other person dies, they have to take a shot. So we are going for insane, off the wall.
We've already done it twice.
Yeah.
Accidentally.
Yeah. And so that's how we died. This is the last written testimony of Jordan and Katie.
This is only part 1 of Master of Crows.
That fills me with terror.
It'll be fine. We'll get through it. So
we'll be fine.
Do you want to start us off, introduce us to Silhara?
Mm-hmm. So basically the whole first 2 or 3 chapters of this book is setting the plot, which is more plays a part than I would have expected in a spicy book, but there's actually a whole plot going on. So we're introduced to Silhara, which is he's a magician, sorcerer who has the title of Master of Crows, and it's kind of unclear what that really means, but
it seems to be a derogatory term, because what's the word for the actual organized group of magicians and sorcerers?
The conclave?
Yeah, that one. So he's an outcast?
Yeah. And I think it's kind of because he's refused to be part of the politicking and be underneath anybody else, because that's an important part of his character is he's this stalwart. Is that a word? Stalwart?
Mm-hmm. I don't know how you say it, but yeah,
sure. Questionable. Very set in his ways, is not going to be trumped by anyone. He is master of himself. And he's also the master of crows.
Because they throw out the phrase crow mage to refer to other mages. And I think there's one point in the book where she describes it as a sorcerer who just sells his services, his magic work for profit, rather than working for the government, essentially.
That kind of makes sense, because Silhara's side job or main job, I guess, is he owns an orange grove.
It's so cute.
It's adorable because he's obsessed with these oranges, but he also hates eating oranges. So
he makes orange flower perfume and sells essential oils. Did I get one? I think that's a shot.
I think so.
Sorry. Take a shot, Katie.
Oh my God.
That came way faster than I thought it would. Sorry.
Oh shit.
Oh my God.
Girl.
And why did I say it like that? We didn't even make
That's
it past the character introduction.
Oh my God.
The bottle's right there if you want to refill.
Just the fact that we have characterized Silhara as an essential oil. I am not okay. But yeah, that's him. And as we're introduced to him, I'm falling apart. As we're introduced to Silhara at the beginning, he is being haunted, harassed,
all of the above.
By the god of corruption, who I guess is a
scary motherfucker is what he is.
Yeah, it's a lesser god of whatever pantheon they got going on, but he's basically a star on the horizon, but he can speak to Silhara. And we kind of learn immediately that he is the Avatar reborn. So it's corruption's human body on Earth, who he will eventually take over Silhara's mind and rule the world and corrupt everything. And yeah.
But apparently can't do it without Silhara's consent. So he's
at least at first.
Yeah. And I think it's pretty early on in the book where she being Grace Draven describes corruption, because he makes these repeated appearances in an kind of an earthly state almost.
Oh yeah.
But I will never be able to unsee the description of corruption in this humanoid form.
Ew.
So
this will haunt your nightmares.
So she describes corruption as this tall, lanky, the limbs are too long, so humanoid.
That is the worst description.
I know, but the arms hang below the knees, the legs are too long for the torso, there's a gaping mouth and no eyes, no nose, gray skinned, and just
Slender Man.
Yeah, it's Slender Man. And Slender Man is horrifying for a reason, but that's also corruption.
Yeah. And he's also rotting. Didn't she describe his skin as sticky in that unhealthy, sickly way where they're rotting from the inside?
Yeah, it's gross. Yeah.
Everything is fine. So yeah, that's the god that's haunting Silhara.
Well, and partially it's because Silhara is very powerful, like the most powerful mage to exist in that time. And he like gave the gigantic middle finger to the government to be like, no, I'm not working for you. Sorry.
Yeah. That's basically his character, is just like giving the middle finger to
everyone.
Yeah, everyone. And he's also kind of described as like almost like Middle Eastern in his like
appearance. Yeah. So he is like tall and kind of lanky, not lanky, but thin.
Yeah.
Has hair down to his waist.
Oh, I don't normally like this trope, but like
it works for him.
Yeah, girl.
He's like swarthy, dark, black hair.
Has
very
like an aquiline nose.
Aquiline, like this nose.
Oh,
yeah. It's not a compliment when you're a woman.
Which is fucked up, but yeah.
But he's also very, like his features are austere.
Yeah.
Very sharp cheekbones. And
so it's someone that's like, because I'm one of those people that I like interesting looking people. Like I find interesting features attractive, whereas like I think some people are like, oh, the perfect whatever golden ratio or whatever. So he has that going on where it's like you're not beautiful, but like you got something going on that's like, what the fuck, cool.
It's like if you like Brad Pitt over Benedict Cumberbatch.
I don't like Benedict Cumberbatch, but Adam Driver.
Yeah, that's a good comparison.
It's just something like they got going on.
Timothy Chalamet.
Timothée Chalamet.
Yeah. So if you steer towards the Adam Drivers and the Timothys of the world, rather than the Brad Pitts and the who's the dude who plays Captain America?
Oh, he's I guess a piece of shit. Aaron. I could not tell you, but the Ryan Reynolds too. I feel like he kind of falls in like, that like usual
vanilla ice cream versus
we like a little spice. Yeah,
mocha chip.
Mocha chip. I can see that. Yeah, just interesting. And that's a good segue because the female lead in this, her name is Martise, and she's a slave/servant.
It's like a indentured servant status with
but
her.
Like plus magic. So a part of her soul is in this like crystal that her owner has, and the owner is Cumbria of Asher, who is the like archbishop or high bishop of the conclave. So he's like second best magician, but he also hates Silhara. Like they got beef, and it's revealed at the end like why they have beef, but like Cumbria would murder Silhara in an instant.
Yeah. And so Martise has been a servant since like she was a child, like 7 or 8. It's kind of heartbreaking, but you also don't get a lot of history prior to that. You are introduced to Martise as adult Martise, servant status. No, that's I think what's intriguing with characters like this who are in like a downtrodden status and you're meant to feel sorry for them. Sometimes you get how they got there from the author to make you feel more sympathetic, and you're just dropped in with her.
Yeah, because even throughout the whole book, you have no frame of reference of why she's indentured at all. Like, I feel like maybe her like mom died and she was like sold away, but you really have like none of her history. But she's like immediately an interesting character because she describes herself as like plain, not very pretty, but just like existing, but okay with existing. Because I feel like there's some main characters who are plain, but they're like bitter about it, which fair in like societies that love beauty above all. But she's just like very mature. She's just like, I am who I am. I'm a servant, but I have like, you know, my own thoughts and opinions about things, but this is who I am. I'm good at being a servant. Like, whatever, fuck off.
It's like she's content with the world except for her status as a slave.
Yeah.
Other than that, there's not much she wants to change. And even her like status as a slave, you don't get any like glimpses into how that is for her.
Yeah.
Which is wild to me.
Yeah. Because we're immediately dropped off and she is kind of basically being talked to by Cumbria of Asher. And he's gotten a letter from Silhara that's basically like, hey, I need an apprentice who can translate like dead languages, but also is like can help me do manual tasks or whatever. And everyone's like immediately suspicious of it. They're like, what the fuck is he? Like, Silhara hates us.
Yeah, because Silhara would never reach out to the Conclave. And this is how you know how bad it's gotten between him and this god of corruption is he's feeling so pressured by the god that he has nowhere else to turn aside from this organization that he hates. Yeah.
Yeah. So our first introduction with Martise is the Cumbria of Asher is telling her, like, you are going to go to Silhara. You're going to be his apprentice. And you're also going to be a spy because we think that he's a heretic. And you give us any evidence and he will be put to death, basically, or etc.
It seems like there's implied magical laws and rules to the world that they suspect him of breaking or something like that, I guess.
Because I think they make like allusions to like a dark arcana or arcana or something. So he's like potentially morally gray baddie.
with it seems like good reason later on as you find like if you are like the living incarnation of the god of corruption on the world, I would be concerned too.
You got a little bit of emotional baggage. And so basically she goes to Neath, which is like the territory household.
It's like his estate.
Yeah. Of Silhara, and just immediately is like, hey, hi, I'm your new apprentice. And he's like, what the fuck?
Like who? Well, and also Neath as a place is super intimidating because even the animals, so this archbishop dude and Martise ride up on the horses, and they can't even ride the horses to like the main entrance gate of this place because it's so dark and wary and feels like death is looming over you as you're walking along the road to the manor. Yeah, it's dark. And so that's the setup for Neath. It looks abandoned and decaying and not pretty.
Because I think it's described like even half of it is like destroyed.
Yeah. Like who would live here?
It's like, okay. And so she's introduced to Silhara, and she has one of those like quintessential like, oh no, he's hot moments.
It's such a good
Yeah. And she kind of also knows that he has like a reputation of being a little bit like questionable, not great. But basically she's like, okay, I'm your apprentice, and that's that. She ends up helping around the estate, and she's introduced to Silhara's like servant.
Gurn.
Well,
okay, before we move any further though, I think it's really interesting to talk about Silhara's first impression of Martise.
Oh yeah.
Because, you know, Cumbria shows up with Martise and Silhara doesn't really give her a second glance. It's just, oh, here's your servant. All right, she's not much to look at. And you get that from his character. Like, oh, this is just another plain woman. What am I going to, another mouth to feed? And then, like, I think he addresses a question to her when they first arrive, right?
Yeah.
And so she responds, and then...
So, that's the other thing about this book. So, Martise is described as having...
Just say it, Katie.
A voice so beautiful it would make someone
come.
Yeah, finish. Jordan made herself explode.
I feel like I'm turning red.
A little bit. But yeah, so she apparently has a very pleasant voice that he's immediately like, what the fuck? Because he's kind of comparing like the contrast that was weird, between her having very like plain features is kind of like a mouse like
very small, kind of easy to overlook, nothing distinguishable,
very like demure, and then all of a sudden she has this voice that's like, oh Jesus Christ.
And so we were talking before we started recording, which is we can't think of what this would sound like.
No,
because I imagine like radio voice a little bit for a dude, like. But for women, what we kind of agreed upon was someone who sounds like Emma Stone.
Yeah. Or even Gal Gadot. Have you heard any of her interviews?
Not that I can recall.
There's just like something about the way she talks that's kind of like entrancing almost. You're like, oh, okay. Like, this is fun to listen to. But there's not many other people or examples that I could...
Which is fair because this is supposed to be a really rare trait. And
that is true.
Shocking when Martise speaks.
Yeah. So that's his immediate like, oh no, she's not hot, but her voice is doing things to my insides is basically his assessment. And so for the next like week or two, Martise is just like helping Gurn around. We didn't talk about Gurn because
Gurn is a cool character.
He's adorable. I love him.
He's a giant.
Yeah.
Literally
huge.
like 7 or 8 feet tall. And the background for Gurn is he was imprisoned with Solhara when they were younger. So back before he was a mage, Solhara was not a good dude.
No. Yeah.
Not at all. And neither was Gurn.
Yeah.
And so I think as a punishment, Gurn had his tongue cut out. So he's a mute, kind of.
Yeah, because he accidentally killed someone or like smashed them to bits.
It's forgivable.
It's kind of one of those I was gonna say Modest Mouse, but that's a band.
Yeah.
Mice and Men.
John Steinbeck?
Yeah. The big guy and then the little guy.
I don't know.
And the big guy's like
I never read it.
Girl, what?
No. It was probably required reading that like I bullshitted my way through.
Wow, I'm impressed. Gentle giant type, but he's also like very nice and he uses sign language to communicate with people. And Martise is immediately like kind of not enamored with him, but they're like
they become besties.
Yeah, like you know those people that you just vibe with, and you're like, we're family now. It's fine. That's basically Martise and Gurn.
They're also kind of united in their mutual disgust for some of Solhara's habits.
Yeah,
and like their attempts to take care of him and make him into like a functioning human being.
Yep, because that's very much their shepherding him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and there's also a final character who gets almost as much screen page.
I know what word you were going for.
Page time as Gurn does, and that's Kale, the mage hunter dog.
Yeah, mage finder.
Mage finder. Yeah. So these are like Great Dane sized dogs that are even scarier looking. So like if a Doberman was the size of a Great Dane.
Yeah. There's like a flock dogs. There's like a dog popular on Instagram that's like I could not tell you, but it's what you're describing.
Okay.
He takes care of the flock.
The flock of geese?
He just hangs out with the barn animals and he protects them.
Okay.
That's Kale.
So Kale, there's like these mage finder dogs that are trained to sniff out people with magical gifts. And so they lose their shit whenever they smell someone with a gift. Like their eyes glow red.
Yeah. And they're like, they hackle.
Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah.
It's a thing. But Kale is like a cute little side character dog that like attaches himself to Gurn and Martise. And yeah, it's cute.
Because that's a good segue into the other thing about Martise. So she has had mage finders set upon her and they freak out and they're like, yep, she's got magical powers, but it hasn't manifested at all. And she's much older now and it's kind of unheard of for her to have a magical power, but like nobody's been able to figure out like what the fuck. And she can't do any spells despite her like massive studying.
Yeah. So part of the conclave is them like identifying children who are gifted and then training them to use their magical gifts. And then so it's like part training academy, part like really toxic.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it, but so they train kids. They also like abuse kids through their power and their training. And so Martise, though a slave, was also like attempted to be trained
because they knew she had power, but they couldn't figure it out. And so Kale like freaks the fuck out when he first meets her, but he doesn't like bite her or anything, thank God. So Selhara knows that she has magical powers, but he's like, okay, well, I guess we'll try to figure it out. But Martise has been helping around the manor estate for a while now, and she hasn't seen Selhara at all. He's been like kind of sequestered away until one morning she's eating breakfast and he comes down and basically he's like, okay, it's time for you to be an apprentice. Like you've just been like doing whatever the fuck, like we got to work. And she's like, well, I have been working, but like, okay. And they have this kind of cute exchange that I included. It's adorable.
I really liked it. You should talk about it.
Okay, so Selhara is like basically like, okay, we're going to start practicing magic. And he says, what? Did you think I lounged around on a couch all day, reading tomes and muttering incantations while Gurn fed me grapes? And she responds, it would explain the dust. So I feel like that kind of encaptures, like, she's snarky as fuck. But in the, like...
It's very controlled.
Yeah, and she's, like, subservient as, like, see, I'm, like, not insulting you, but I'm coming in with these savage fucking one-liners. Like...
I thought all of these scenes between, like, these daily routine scenes where they're having breakfast together or they're working in the field, which we'll get into later, they seem more heavy and more intimate than many of the action sequences. And I think that's something this author does really well, which is establishing like presence despite activity. Like all they're doing is having porridge and oranges, but they have this back and forth and it's like, ooh, you can feel the romantic tension.
Because immediately like they have their back and forth after that or whatever, and Selhara says, you've done an unwise thing, Martise of Asher.
Ooh, I got
You've
tingles.
caught my interest. And I guess he said it softly, like in a soft tone, so you can only imagine like badass sorcerer is the like black sheep of the family, and he's saying something very intimate in a soft voice, like everything's fine.
Thank you. Yes, please. I'd like to have some more.
Because that's kind of their whole interactions, is he is like constantly underestimating her, and then she comes up with some kind of like witty something and he's like, wait a second.
It's always him giving her a second look or a second listen. Which I love when people and characters are underestimated and they get their own in the end. Like,
it's satisfying.
Very. And Martise definitely gets that, but she never does it in like this swaggering, blatant kind of way. She's competent and confident while still understanding exactly kind of where she fits in the world.
Yeah. Very subtle.
Yeah.
All of her comments are very subtle. So after breakfast, they immediately kind of go into the first attempt to find her magic. And this part is kind of fucked up. Selhara floats her into the air, and then he's like, okay, Martise, like you've studied for a long time. Like, what's the incantation to drop you down safely? And she's like freaking out because obviously
screaming. She is screaming because she's levitated in the air.
Yeah, and like up by the ceiling, and it's like very high, and she's panicking, and he drops her from that height and then stops her at the very last second. She is like pale white, eyes huge. And it's kind of his attempt to like distance himself because he's intrigued by her, but he's like,
he doesn't like it though.
Yeah. And he's like, I know you're a spy, but like, fuck off. I'm going to scare you. And she kind of has like a surprising response to him. She's like, that was horrifying, but like, okay. And he's like, what? I thought you were going to run away.
Which, you know, typical, like if the reward for you like living with this mage and spying on him is your freedom, if you're a slave, well, she's going to roll with it no matter what. But also there's a history with the conclave and the gifted children, which is extreme emotion bringing out their gift because it kind of lies dormant until something instigates it. And I think that's what happened with Selhara too. So he's trying like all of these different mechanisms to get her gift to manifest itself. And yeah, it's not happening.
It's not working. And it's kind of funny because immediately after trying something and it didn't work, he says, I understand you've been helping Gurn. A comfort to know that while you can't work a simple spell, you can at least milk a goat. And she comes back. Yes, master. I've worked among livestock all my life, including cows, pigs, goats, and asses. And it's just this savage fucking one-liner. I love her.
So Martise is a very likable, relatable character because, and this might sound like a critique, but because we don't get a lot of her history, because this perspective switches so many times, you don't get a lot of her.
Yeah.
So it's easy to what's that word when you put yourself into the character? But you know where I'm
projecting?
going. Kind of. It's the reason why like Bella from Twilight was so popular. She's enough of a blank slate that every reader can see themselves as that character.
Self-insert?
Yeah. Like that. So Martise, while distinct, there's nothing really at fault with her. Like if you're reflecting on yourself, right? Like every person at one point in their life doesn't feel pretty enough, right? Okay, so a character that is described and feels plain, okay, relatable, right? A character that is just like pushing back at authority enough to feel like they're not getting walked all over, but yet still likable and not an asshole.
Yeah, that is true. I never considered that she's doesn't have, not flaws, but like is very just middle of the road.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I like that as a character. But I think there should be enough, like if a character is fully developed, there should be things you dislike about them. The same way you dislike things about like real people.
That's true. Okay, Jordan come in here with the like deep cuts.
Sorry.
That was well deserved. Huh. And I think you wrote this comment. She gets drunk on Pelita's fire.
Yeah, so I don't know if it's the levitating session, but there's another session where he tries to basically scare the shit out of her and
to make her magic manifest.
Yeah, no. And so she's like, no, God damn it, I need a drink. So she goes to the kitchen and she's like visibly shaken. And I think he summoned a demon or something like that.
Yeah, like a widow's scourge or something.
Yeah. I pictured, what's that scary ghost thing that is a boggart?
Oh, yeah.
That's what yeah.
Oh, yeah. I just imagine some freaky, like, that skirtles up,
That's a Harry Potter ghost thing.
For Harry Potter.
Yeah. So that's what happens. She's freaked out. She goes to the kitchen. Gurn pours her like a glass of this drink called, say it?
Dragon's piss. Pelita's fire. That's fair. That's a shot. That's what it's called in the book. Like, I didn't just make that up. That's the common phrase.
You had just said Pelita's fire? And that's what I was hoping you would say again.
Dragon's piss.
And you said dragon's piss so straight-faced. Like,
that's what I thought you meant.
No emotion whatsoever.
Yeah, dragon's piss.
But unlike our soju, this drink will, like, one sip will fuck you up.
Yeah.
And so that's what happens to Martise, except she drinks the whole glass.
Oh my God.
And she's feeling fuzzy.
Yeah, because even Gurn is like, girl.
What did you do? He's like signing like, stop.
Are you okay?
And then Silhara comes down as she's like kind of floating around the room a little bit, like feeling
What's
good.
up?
And Silhara's like, Gurn, what the fuck did you do? And he either brings out a drink or he makes her something. Like he takes her to like an apothecary room, makes her some sort of recuperating drink, and she's instantly fine, which... Woman, I wish we had something like that in the real world.
Oh, God. Because then you get all the fun of drinking and then not fun of the hangover that I am also going to have tomorrow. Everything's fine.
Everything's okay. But yeah, that's a cute little scene too. Where
she also says like, oh, you're beautiful when he comes down, or like some kind of comment that he's like, oh, you're drunk.
Well, he's always like swaggering around in these blood red robes and these jeweled belts, and his hair is down to his fucking ass. Like,
yeah,
he's a very mage.
A mage's mage. Yeah, that's fair. And then I don't think she's like passed a test, but all of a sudden it's like orange harvesting season, and so it's like all hands on deck. She helps harvest in the orange grove, and there is not a way I can explain this without like reading it verbatim, but the way that he helps her like learn how to cut these oranges is again very intimate. And he also she has a moment where she's like, oh no, he's hot, like again, because he's like all sweaty and his like shirt's close to him, and
okay, like, let's talk about this for a moment. Yeah. Okay, think of every kind of scene where a very classic gender roles thing where a man is teaching a woman something. Oh, do you know how to play pool? Let me show you how to hold the cue.
Yeah.
But do you know what I mean? It's that trope, which obviously exists for a reason.
Yeah.
But what I think Grace Draven does really well is those very subtle intimacy building scenes where it's just him showing her a task and there's no implied romantic tension. It's just, here's the job we have to do. I'm going to show you how to do it. But you see the relationship developing through those moments, these very brief day-to-day. It's very satisfying.
Yeah, it really is. And it's fun too because I think it immediately after flashes to Silhara's point of view, but he's kind of like impressed by her like pragmaticism and just like, okay, this is a task, I have to do it. I've never done it before, but I'm going to work hard at it and do it well. And he's like impressed by her ability to like catch on fast. So it's kind of like you immediately are thrust into, her trying to figure out something for the first time. But then you immediately get that like positive feedback of like, oh, she's doing it well. And like, he's not saying that to her, but you're like, oh, the feel good endorphins. Like,
it's a very like warm, fuzzy, cozy moment. Yeah.
And there's a lot of those little intimate moments that make everything better throughout the plot, that you're like, okay, they're intimate, even if it's not. And it feels smutty, even though it's not. Like, I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah, it's not. Like when you're reading this, and this is a major portion of the book, there is nothing overtly romantic, nothing physical. It's just these two characters interacting through these, day-to-day actions. But it feels intimate because of the chemistry that's already kind of built by the author, which is like this very unique thing that you don't get to see a whole lot. Yeah. Like sometimes you need these overt actions, like where the hero saves the heroine or vice versa. Someone's near death. Someone gets jealous because there's a third party involved. No, this is just them cutting oranges off a tree.
Yeah. And I think that speaks to Grace Draven's ability to write compelling characters and to develop them well enough that you feel satisfied by these little moments. Because she doesn't have to rely on these, crazy moments of very tropey-esque behavior. It's just like these cute little intimate moments where you're like, oh, I need to like fan myself, even though they're just like learning how to do something.
I think a really good example of this is the fact that Martise observes Silhara eating oranges every morning for breakfast. And he despises oranges because he has to eat them all the time because, like, one, it's free food, right? It's like easily available. So, and like they don't live richly. Silhara is basically poor. He's like house rich or
but like destitute.
Like his clothes are patched and worn. He is very much dependent on the sale of his oranges and stuff. So he eats oranges every day, but he despises them. But it's that, like, you get to know so much about Silhara as a character just by knowing that he eats oranges every day for breakfast, but despises them. Like, it's such a good character device. Love it.
And you also get like very intimate description of him like peeling oranges,
which
like,
was strangely hot.
I know. See, that's what I mean. All of these moments are strangely hot. I cannot quantify it. You just read it and you're like, oh okay, I understand now. Because explaining it does not do it justice. But life kind of continues on at Neath. Everything is vaguely normal. Silhara's still trying to help Martise like find her power or whatever. And they have kind of like more cute banter. So there's this one scene, Martise is at breakfast, Kale is under the table, and she's like rubbing him with his like foot. Like you do that with like dogs that are just like, oh, can I get a scrap? And Silhara comes in and he says, you spoil my dog. I now have a mage finder who spends his day lolling with the swine and begging caresses from a woman. Not that I blame him for the last. And she comes back.
This line.
I'm confused, master. Do you speak of the failures of men or dogs? And it's just these savage one-liners that you're like, I love you.
She's brutal.
Yeah. But it's also the moments that Silhara's like, oh,
it makes him open his eyes a little bit and like look at her as a person rather than this spy.
It's adorable.
I loved the next scene.
Oh my god. So again, this is this fucking like it's
you
smut,
feel like
but
you're
not.
You feel like you're watching something that you shouldn't be watching. But it's just so can I just go into it?
Yes, please.
Okay. So they're working in the orange fields every day because it's harvest season. And this is the first time Martise, who has previously worked as like a scholar, translator. She's a slave, yes, but she's a slave in like a scholarly like status.
Educated way.
Yeah, it's weird. So she's not really used to hard labor. And if you've ever done like farm work or anything physical outside, it's
yard work for a day.
Yeah, it's hard on your body because you're using muscles that you haven't used a lot. And so she's kind of crippled after doing this and like can barely move. And like I felt like that before. And you feel like nothing will save you.
Yep.
And so they're like eating lunch or something, and Silhara's like, come with me. And it's this very like, oh, where are you taking me? And so he takes her to this storeroom, ointment room.
That sounds weird.
Ointment room. That is weird. I'm sorry.
Like a distilling room. It's like where he turns orange products into other orange products.
Like an apothecary, but like more rustic.
Yeah, makes perfume and stuff.
Yeah, mixes essential oils. It's fine. So he sets her down and tells her like, take your dress off, basically. And she's alarmed. She's like, nope, I didn't come here for that. Don't do this. And then he has the best response to her obvious like wariness and her feeling of fear, which is like basically along the lines of, don't worry, I'm not interested. Like if I want a woman, I can get one. Like you clearly cannot work right now. Let me help you. And it's this very non-sexual, but him taking care of her. Just to take care of her. So like she's like, okay, this is awkward for me. So she kind of like shrugs her dress off enough to like show her back. And he takes this ointment and just rubs it into her back and shoulders enough, the places where she basically can't reach. And it works wonders. And it's everything that is
Sorry. I'll take a shot for that because the wistfulness in your voice. Everything's fine.
That sound I don't think I could ever replicate in my life. Anyway, Sahara takes care of Martise. It doesn't morph into anything sexual. It's just him taking care of her. And she is, I think, at once astonished and relieved. And like she's continually revising her view of him the more time she spends with him. And this is one of those turning points where she's like, oh, he didn't take advantage of me. Oh, he's actually like a kind, decent person despite being very sassy and
sassy. And it's nice too because the scene is told from his perspective, and he's kind of like just talking to her throughout, like trying to like keep her calm or
he's
like
trying
comfortable.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so he kind of reveals that he was born or like grew up in a brothel because his mother was is there a better word for prostitute?
A lady of the night.
That was the word I was going to go for too. She was a prostitute, and so he grew up in a brothel in.
Sorry, yeah, I think he calls them houris.
Yeah,
houris. It's like Houri, right?
Houri, which I think is like a some kind of term. It's like a more like not as bad term, I think. I don't know. But he has this funny comment, like, it's nothing I haven't seen before unless you have a third breast. Like, that would be interesting.
I forgot about that one.
And so that kind of like calms her down. She's like, okay, this is fine. But it's told from his perspective, and you kind of get that he's like very clinical. He's just trying to help her. But also, he has this kind of like revision in his mind of like, he has a moment of like, oh no, she's hot.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that part.
Because, you know, very plain. She wears like baggy clothes that are like hand-me-downs from Cumbria's wife, I think. And so they don't fit well. And then she kind of like takes the back off and he's like, oh my God. Like porcelain skin, curvy, like epitome of what you'd want to be as a woman.
He gets like a glimpse of her like side.
Yep. You got like side titty. He loses his mind, kind of.
So I think it's important to classify, and this is the way you make plain female heroines relatable and approachable, which is the fact they're not really plain. Like, you've seen plain people, plain women and men, and we're humans. We like attractiveness, right? These characters are not like that. I don't think. It's not. These people wouldn't, based on how she's described. So she's got like these amber colored eyes and like copper hair. And I imagine her features are just the way you'd expect someone who doesn't wear makeup and is kind of on the thinner side.
Yeah. And it kind of felt like a cop-out almost of like, she's plain, but like a body for days. You know what I mean? Like
why do you have to compensate?
Yeah.
Like, you already compensated with her like
voice or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. But it was also, again, I think you described it really well. Like a moment that was so intimate that you're like, I shouldn't be watching this. But it's like satisfying in that kind of way that you're like, this is
so this is the same kind of intimate feeling moments that like we see a lot in K-dramas.
Yeah.
Which is there's romantic tension, but there's nothing sexual.
Yeah.
It's just these kinds of moments. And K-dramas do those moments really well because they have to.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of like what is missing sometimes from romance books if you don't have like the buildup behind it. And they kind of maybe rely too heavily on these like, you know, climax scenes in both ways to describe that word. They kind of rely too much on that. But this very these like moments kind of build the tension up in a very satisfying way. So it's like, yeah, there might not be sex all over every single page, like, you know, A Court of Silver Flames or whatever, but there's these moments that you're like, oh, this is naughty. Like, I shouldn't be watching this, but it's not naughty. So it's a want. I can't explain it very well, but trust me.
But don't worry, if you stick around long enough in this book, you'll get to the naughty sections just fine.
There are naughty sections.
I think this might be a good point to wrap for us.
Yeah, because the next part is just they're continuing to translate things. They have some pages in a library that are cut off. They're missing pages. And Selhara kind of like is like, okay, we got to find the rest of the pages. I stole them from a haunted keep that a leech
I don't know. I didn't even try and say that in my head.
Lich, ghosty boy.
Ghosty boy.
A ghosty boy is haunting.
Oh my God.
And we have to go find them. And Martise is like, what the fuck? And
so,
then they go off.
Part one is like development and buildup of like the romantic tension between these two characters. And then part two is kind of where the action kicks off.
Yeah.
So
kind of extends the plot a little bit.
Yeah. So we'll kind of resume part two with more action.
Action. Oh, in both senses of the word.
Some action.
Hey.
So anyways, from our shelf to yours.
We'll see you on the next page. Hi, readers. If you'd like to help us pick our next book, send us a message on Instagram.
Or if you'd like to just listen, we post new episodes every Monday and Wednesday on Spotify, Apple, and Amazon. Thanks for listening.
Bussin'.